daily news analysis. As you know, this is the place where we analyze the day's newspaper without missing out any of the important stories. We take up the Hindu newspaper and the Indian Express newspaper and take out the most relevant news stories from both the mains and the prelims examination point of view. Let's see what are the different news articles that we have taken for you today. But before that, just a quick reminder, if you're someone who is planning to appear for the UPSC examination in 2026 or maybe beyond that, you can check out the courses that we offer. There are 1 and 2 year courses on offer focusing on preparation for all the stages of the examination. If you have any doubts and you need any other advice or information regarding these courses, feel free to check out the description of the video. You'll find a link where you can get all this information. Now, without any further ado, let's see what are the topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. All the topics here are taken from the Hindu newspaper. The first article is about India's rising e-waste. As our population increases and the population becomes more and more consumeristic in nature, that is consuming more products, ordering more things online on sale, we have an increasing problem of e-waste, that is electronic waste. How are we placed right now to handle that? Do we have enough capabilities to manage that waste? That is the topic. Second article is about the water standards. It's a very interesting article about how across the entire country the government has set different standards for what should be the minimum water requirement. For example, for the rural areas, it's a different requirement. For urban areas, it's a different requirement. And for metropolitan cities, the government tries to give even more water per capita. We'll be discussing what that is. The third article, again from environment, it's about how the shipping industry is trying to tackle emissions and are they being successful enough here or not. Fourth is a very interesting article. It's a bit of piece of history about how from the era of Nizam in Hyderabad, how there were decisions taken to ensure that Hindu and Muslim employees were at par with each other when it comes to service conditions. And the last article about how we as human race is polluting each and every part of earth. This article discusses how the Himalayan ecosystem also is facing huge pollution specifically because of single-use plastics. These are the topics that we'll be discussing. So let's begin with the first one. The first article that you see on the screen as we discussed is about the rising e-waste. Now, let me begin this by asking a very simple question. If you as an individual have only one earphone, or if you as an individual only require one earphone, be it wireless or be it a wired earphone, do you still consider buying other earphones when there's a sale, let's say an Amazon or a Flipkart sale? A lot of these cases are of impulse buying, where you see something that is given to you at a lesser rate than the MRP, and your first impulse is to buy that, even if you do not need it. The result is that you end up having many more products, electronic products, than what you require. Each and everyone would have on average 2 to 3 earphones. You might have 1 or 2 mobile phones. You might even have more than one laptop as well. Now, the result of this situation is that at times when your instrument or when your appliance runs out of life, what do you do with it? How do you recycle it? How do you make sure that it goes into the right hands? For most of us, for most of the individuals, we do not know a way. We do not know how to dispose our earphones, how to dispose our other waste. And that becomes a big problem. As our population is increasing, as our population is becoming more tech savvy, as we are using more and more instruments in the name of smart appliances, we are digging ourselves into this grave of e-waste. Although there are certain facilities that have been set up specifically to ensure that we recycle this waste, but they are far, far, far lower than the level where we require them to be. In the mains examination also, you do see these kind of questions. Look at the one that was asked in 2018. By the way, I hope all of you know by now that whatever practice questions we give you here, be it for the mains exam or for the prelims exam, we do expect you to try and attempt them as well. Try and see if you can attempt these quiz questions so that you can also practice from time to time how to do answer writing and how to attempt these questions. Now, the context of this article, as I said, is the increasing amount of e-waste that we are seeing in India. And it's not just a practice of India per se. It is a phenomena that is a global phenomena where in each and every country, we have people buying many more products as compared to what they need, as compared to what they require. That is where e-waste has become such a huge problem. The consumption of electronics has reached a certain level where you are buying not because you need it, but because you want it. And that is when the e-scale issue or the e-waste issue has reached a scale where it has become very difficult for the countries such as India to actually handle that. Interestingly, you might also have seen how from the developed world, huge ships filled up with lakhs and millions of mobile phones and other appliances come to the developing world as a dumping ground. Lakhs and millions of these mobile phones are dumped in the developing countries from the developed world in the name of giving you precious elements, in the name of allowing you to extract as much as you want from this. If you look at the statistics in India, look at how alarming the situation is. The e-waste generation has increased many times just in the past few years. It was 7.08 lakh metric tons 2017-18, and just within 23-24 we have seen a 151% surge, and it has reached 17.78 lakh metric tons. Now, whether it is too high or too low mainly depends upon how much capability do we have to recycle that. The amount of waste is one thing, but if we still have the capability to recycle all of that and extract whatever important things that we can, then it's not a bad deal at all. The problem is when you cannot extract it and it goes into the wrong hands, or even worse, when it starts to harm you, when it starts to harm the people who are working on recycling manually, when it starts to harm the companies and organizations who are working in this sector. As of today, unfortunately, only 10% of e-waste is formally recycled. That is the bigger problem here. The amount of e-waste is one side of the story, but how much can you recycle, that will define whether is it good or bad. Over 90% of it is handled by the informal sector. Now, when I say informal sector, what do I mean? A person not wearing any safety gloves or not having any safety equipment, trying to ensure that we can take out elements that are harmful, that are critical elements from the mobile phones or from these appliances in order to ensure that they can sell some of it off. That is how this informal sector is working, and this is where we have a big problem. Now, if you look at other statistics, look at how much of an opportunity we are missing out. As per this article, about 80,000 crore of loss is seen annually in the critical metal value, meaning that all these electronic appliances, be it the mobile phone, be it other appliances, if you are recycling them properly, there is a possibility of extracting a lot of critical elements that can be used and recycled in many other ways. This is something that we are not doing, because of which we are losing out about 80,000 crore annually. Just to put that into context, this is $10 billion worth that we are talking about. These are those metals for which we are dependent on countries such as China for import. And the same metals that are in our appliances that have a capability of being reused and recycled are being washed away. Similarly, we are also hampering our economy because of $20 billion loss in health impact. The people in the informal sector who are working to recycle this without any knowledge, without any safety equipment, when they fall ill, on their health issues or on their treatment, the government and the government facilities end up spending $20 billion. Then there is about $20 billion unrealized tax revenue to unregistered transaction. If it was done formally, the government would also end up earning a lot of tax revenue, which has not been the case. All of these together have created a problem where the informal sector has been harming the government of India for many ways, or in many ways which the government should now try to curtail. Now, what is the answer to this? Whatever we have discussed so far is a part of the problem. What is a part of the solution then? First big solution, you might have heard of it, EPR, that is Extended Producer Responsibility. In simple terms, the producer of the appliance, let's say the company that has made that LED bulb, or the company that has made that earphone, the company that has made that laptop, it is their responsibility to recycle it. So for example, if you have a laptop or you have a, let's say, an earphone that is not working anymore, you should call them up and they would have to arrange the pickup. They'll pick it up from your place and they will recycle it in a manner that it should be done. That is one way to do it. Now, it's easier said than done. If you actually buy an LED bulb today, notice this. On the packet of the LED bulb, there is something written with respect to this extended producer responsibility, where you are told where can you submit this if you want it to be recycled properly. The onus then lies on you. You cannot just keep on blaming the industry, the corporate that they are not doing their job. The onus also lies on the end user. Why are you not doing your part of the responsibility? We do have e-waste management rules 2022. They introduce floor pricing for EPR certificates. Now, what exactly are these? So all these companies that are actually producing these appliances have to produce certificates to the government that how much recycling did we do. When the company falls below their target, they can buy these EPR certificates from other companies as well. If these EPR certificates are sold and bought at a very low price, there is no incentive for the company to do their own recycling. They will just keep on buying these certificates. So what the government is trying to do, government is trying to increase the price of this EPR certificates. So the companies can now buy these certificates at a higher price. It will encourage recycling. It will encourage the companies to take up more responsibility about recycling and ensure that whatever appliances they have are recycled at a much faster pace and at a much bigger scale. Now, what is it that the other nations are doing? Are we the only one facing this issue? No. Developed countries obviously use more appliances than us. The problem that we have is with respect to population. But there are countries such as Switzerland, Japan, South Korea, etc. All of them do have similar kind of laws. And again, at the end of the day, the most successful way to manage that is at the end of the day EPR, it is extended producer responsibility only. Other countries are doing it in a much more stricter manner as compared to India. That may be a scenario. But at the end of the day, there is nothing new as such. It's not an idea which is very different from what India does. European Union also has something called Waste, Electrical and Electronic Equipment Directive. Again, it's a much like most of the other laws and policy that EU has, it's considered as a global standard for a best practice of how we can resolve these kind of issues. But again, this is not a problem that can be solved very easily. Now, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but the reality is that problem will only increase. As the per capita income increases, as people buy more and more stuff, you have more and more stuff to dispose and recycle. And if you don't build up your capabilities simultaneously at the same level or at the same proportion, you will not be able to have the kind of impact or you will not be able to solve this problem in the long run. I'll add one more thing to it. You talk so much about solar energy, solar modules, and solar panels. That also is a problem waiting to explode in India. I discussed this earlier as well. The solar revolution in India started just about a decade ago. And because most of the solar panels have an year or have an age of 10 to 12 years or 15 years, most of them are still working. But once their cycle ends and then you have to recycle them, then it will again become a big problem. While expanding solar capabilities or having more and more solar panels sounds like a good idea for now, but in the long run, if you do not develop the capability to actually work on recycling, there is no one simple solution to that. There is also an environmental and health impact to it. There are toxic components that are present in minute quantity but still have a capability of harm your health. This is where we have lead, we have mercury, we have lead, we have mercury, we also have cadmium. All these have a major impact on your health, even if you come in contact with these in a very, very small quantity. The e-waste also contributes to urban mining potential. There are rare earth elements that can be extracted, something that we have been worried about because we have to import most of it from countries such as China. We do not want that to happen, ideally speaking, but this is a big problem. And the solution lies in our own hands. Can we extract these mineral resources? If we can, our dependence on other countries will reduce. Now, what is the rested measure to it? What can we do going forward? First of all, as I said, the biggest solution lies in extended producer responsibility. The biggest solution is in strengthening the existing laws. In most of the problems that you will see around you, the solution is never to have a new law. We already have a bunch of laws. The solution is on strengthening the laws, making them better so that their effectiveness can be improved. We also have incentives, or we also need to introduce more incentives for manufacturers to have their equipments designed in a manner that is more friendly to the environment. We have to raise more awareness. We have to create formal jobs. A bunch of these things can be and should be done in the long run. This is the suggested measure as per the article written here. This was our first article for the day about e-waste. The second article that we have here is about the water standards and how it's a very interesting situation where the water standards, or rather the water requirements in different parts of the country, is seen very differently. The context of this article here is simple, but before we go there, again giving you an example of the kind of questions related to such topics that can be asked. Look at this question of 2011. Question on salinization. These kind of questions related to these aspects are very commonly asked. So please make sure that you do have a strong hold on understanding of all of these topics. Now, again, what exactly is the issue here? In simple terms, when the government makes certain policies about water supply, and when the government says, okay, in villages I have to give water, in cities also I have to give water, in metro cities I have to give water, the government makes their policies by having a goal in their mind. Goal as in how much water minimum do I need to give to this place? Ideally speaking, you might imagine that it should be the same in the entire country. For example, if the government thinks that in the entire country everyone needs 80 to 100 liters of water per day, that is acceptable. But interestingly, as per the author, there are different standards depending upon various arbitrary parameters. For example, the author here says that if you look at how the government makes policies about per capita water supply standard, that is, how many liters per capita per day is required by an Indian to live an optimum life. For mega cities, it is about 150 liter per capita per day. So, person living in, let's say, Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad would need, as per the government, at least 150 liters of water per day. Similarly, if you're living in other cities, as per the government, you need 135 liters of water. If you are living, let's say, in a rural area where the Jal Jeevan mission specifically is working, about 55 liters of water is enough. Now, the point that the author is making is it right or wrong? That's a different story altogether. The point that the author is making is that it is random, it is arbitrary. You are randomly deciding that a person living in a village would need this much water. A person living in a mega city would need more than double the water per day for X compared to a person living in the villages. This is not uniform. If it is not uniform, then as per the author, it should depend on factors such as climate change. It should depend on factors such as geography, availability of water. But rather than that, as per the government, as you can see here, it is dependent on where you live and not the situations or not the circumstances around you. That is a weird part. These standards are set by different agencies, and maybe that is why there are different standards. For example, some of them are set by Bureau of Indian Standards. Then some of them are set by Central Public Health and Environmental Engineering Organization that works under Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Because these are random mostly and there is no scientific method behind it, it does not give you the kind of impact or result that you actually hope for. And this is the big mismatch that this particular article is talking about. As per the author here, if you look at the standards, they are used for planning of different government schemes. Take an example of the Jal Jeevan Mission. Under Jal Jeevan Mission, the government of India, for example, hopes to ensure that in every rural household we will get piped water connection. Now, when you give a piped water connection, that does not just mean that you will give a few drops of water and that is enough. If you are giving a piped water connection, you have to also promise the people how much water are you going to send or are you going to give every single day. And this is where that parameter does not hold true. Designs here are based on standards to qualify for central funding. Means how much water will be given is dependent on how much money or funding is given to that scheme and vice versa. There is no enforcement mechanism to ensure that the standard of living for citizens is uniform across the country. It is kiddish and it is wrong to assume that two people living in the same country have different water requirements. when one living in a mega city would have more than double the requirement as compared to one living in the rural areas. We need to have better standards and more standards that are uniform as compared to the ones that we have. Now, one other big problem that we have is in most of the households, we do not have functioning meters of water. Take an example of your own household. Think about this. Does your household have a meter that tells you how much water are you using in a day or in a month? Like the meter that you have is for electricity. That shows you how many units of electricity have you consumed in a month, depending upon which you have to pay the electricity bill. But for water, there is hardly any household where you will see such a functioning meter. Because of that lack of metering, because of all these issues, we have not even been able to ensure that the amount of water that the government is promising to each household, whether each household is actually getting that water or not. Because when the government decides, we want to give you at least, let's say, 55 liters of water per day per person, how are you going to measure it if there's not even a watering meter? And that is also a big problem. So the water usage in India is not just wrong at the policy level, it is also wrong and not being implemented properly at the ground level as well. It's not that easy to change it as per the author. For example, the author says infrastructure is being planned on assumption. As I told you, there are assumptions being made on how much water would a person need if you live in a rural area as compared to how much water would you need in an urban area, so on and so forth. There are inaccurate demand projections in high need areas also. The government has not really made a proper assumption of what exactly are the requirements. For example, take the example of Mumbai. Mumbai is planning dams based on a per capita demand of 240 liters per capita per day. How did they arrive at the 240 liter per capita per day number? There is not much logic to it. So without much logic, if you are making such kind of an issue or if you're making such kind of an assumptions to make policies that require lakhs and crores of rupees to be spent, that's not a very impressive way forward. It all has to be a part of better urban planning. It has to be a part of better city planning as well. Now, if we are randomly deciding on a number, what is it that the WHO says? The World Health Organization must have a say in this matter. The WHO recommends 50 to 100 liters per capita per day as optimum. Again, if you compare that to where our requirements are, for us within India, the government says 55 liters per person per day in rural areas, then 135 liters in urban areas, and 150 liters when you have or when you talk about, let's say, the bigger cities. This is where WHO's recommendation is much, much, much lower. The developed countries are much more flexible. Developed countries have been able to ensure that water supply is dependent upon the area that you live in, depending on the requirement. I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say someone living in an area where you usually have a lot of sunlight, the temperature remains warm. The water requirement in that area would obviously be larger or bigger as compared to someone living in an area where there is automatically a lot of rainfall. How do you expect a person living in Jaisalmer in Rajasthan would have the same water requirement per day as compared to someone, let's say, living in Meghalaya, living near Cherapur, living near Mausanram? You can't expect that. That is a variation that in India we have not accounted for, and that is a big problem. Developed countries, most of them have accounted for these kind of variations, which is where the suggestion is that we have to work better to make these segregated aims. There are various government policies that have been working in the line of water supply across the country. We have the Jal Jeevan Mission, which has to provide tapped water connection in the rural areas. It is based on 55 liter per capita per day standard. This is what the government is aiming for. It is outdated. It is not based on any scientific data, but this is what the government aims for. Then we have the Swachh Bharat Mission, that also works on improving sanitation infrastructure across the entire country. We have the Smart Cities Mission. By the way, I hope you remember Smart Cities Mission just concluded a few weeks back, where the official timeline got concluded. Although the government did not clarify whether it was able to achieve the goals of setting up these 50 smart cities or not. But all these programs are the government's attempts to ensure a dependable water supply across the entire country, which has not been the case so far. These are some other suggestions. Again, don't have one set pattern or goal of water supply across the country. Dependent on the requirements, depending upon the area you live in, the water requirements or the goal of water supply should be different. There should be mandatory monitoring of this water supply. We should use much better tools and technology to ensure that whatever amount of water is promised, that amount of water is given to them. These are certain suggestions that have been given as a part of how to improve this particular problem. Moving on to the third article for the day then. The next article that we have here is, as you can see on the screen, based on the shipping industry and how is it tackling emissions. The simple idea is over 90% of the global trade happens through shipping. Because these are huge container ships, they obviously emit a lot of gases, a lot of emissions happen because of these ships. This is why the global trade, the countries around the world that are importing and exporting, have to look into how to solve such a problem. And this is what this article is about. What is it that the countries are doing? If you look at how a kind of a question can be asked here, this is a kind of question that was asked in 2016. See if you can answer this and do let us know in the comment section what is the answer to this previous year question. That will help you revise as well. Now, the context of this article is simple. Recently, there was a meeting of International Maritime Organization, IMO, held 83rd meeting of Marine Environment Protection Committee, MEPC 83. The idea was simple, to look into how to tackle emissions of the shipping industry. India also played a big role here. Why? Two things. First, India has a very long coastline. So we do have a considerable amount of import and export that happens through there. India exports a lot of stuff. We import a lot of crude oil. We import a lot of edible oil as well and many other things. We just inaugurated a huge port in Kerala. You saw the Prime Minister inaugurating it. All of these things make India a big player, a major player in this field, wherein we have to look into how the global shipping industry is evolving. And India shared some of its strategies as well as a part of this 83rd meeting of this particular group. And this is what this article is based on. Now, let's look at some numbers which may be surprising for a lot of you. Shipping industry alone, if it would be considered as a country, imagine this. If shipping industry alone was a country, it would be the sixth largest emitter in the entire world. This is the amount of emissions that they have. The shipping industry, in terms of absolute data, contributes around 1 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases emissions, which is about 2.8% of global emissions. Imagine 2.8% of global emissions, and this is only bound to increase. As per the reports, the emissions could increase by 50% to 250% by 2050 if no action is taken. If we continue on our same merry way as we are doing right now, this is where we will end up reaching. That's a huge problem. While we talk about countries trying to achieve net zero, while we talk about countries are looking to go ahead and have solar energy, green hydrogen, etc., what we miss out on is the trade part of it, which is leading to so many emissions. Now, this 83rd meeting of IMO's committee, they discuss a lot of issues, especially about how to reduce the emissions. Ultimately, they tried to adopt the Singapore hybrid model based on India's bridging mechanism. The idea was simple. Indian government wanted to ensure that there are certain parameters that have to be given to ships and shipping industries. Those ships that are in line with them should be taxed lower, and those ships that are emitting more should be taxed higher. We also talked about, or that committee also talked about, the net zero framework, which is a binding international framework to levy emissions on shipping. Now, this is something that many countries who export a lot of stuff would not like. A country like China, for example, since they export so much stuff, having any more taxes on export just because they are shipping would not really be in their favor. So something that they do not really like. And this is where not all the countries are on the same page. Also, please understand, whenever there are talks about the world moving towards cleaner fuel, the world moving towards more sustainable energy, there would obviously be a few countries that would not like it. Which ones? For example, the ones whose entire fortune is based on selling oil and gas. Saudi Arabia, UAE, they would not really appreciate when the world is moving so fast towards reducing fossil fuel or adopting sustainable energy. These are the different proposals that were discussed there. India, for example, our proposal was targeted levy on under compliant ships. So the ships that are not compliant with the standards here, they should be given or they should be taxed more. Singapore have a tiered levy system with greenhouse gas standard. China talks about market-based tradable compliance units, means if a ship is polluting the environment, they should be able to buy off certificates of other ships or other shipping companies. It's similar to buying or selling of carbon credits. That if you are burning more carbon, if you're emitting more carbon, maybe you can offset that by having a kind of an agreement or buying those certificates of cleaner environment, clean energy with some other country. EU have their own kind of a mechanism, and International Chamber of Shipping talks about how a flat carbon tax per ton of CO2 emitted should be imposed. So there are different countries or different proposals that have been proposed here. The problem with these kind of international platforms is it's difficult to arrive at a binding solution. But the problem is because shipping is such a global factor. Shipping is something that connects every country. Unless you come to one single conclusion, it becomes very difficult for it to be implemented. Globally, there were diverse reactions. As I told you, the fossil fuel oil exporting countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, obviously were not very happy with this. They would not want such a quick transition to green energy because it harms their business. On the other hand, the small island nations, the ones that have the most to lose, the ones that are facing the brunt of climate change the most, they are the ones who are happy with this. They want these kind of taxes to be put on. Then we have China and Greece. They are concerned about competitiveness, China specifically, because it exports a lot of stuff. And if you put taxes on that, the exporting commodities or the material will become costlier. Their trade competitiveness will reduce. US, on the other hand, as you expected, Donald Trump did not even participate. They said, we don't care about this. We only care about our own trade. And as long as our trade is fine, we are least concerned about that. We just do not want our trade to be harmed. These are the different kind of reaction that we saw from different countries in such a committee meeting. What has India been doing? As I said, we import a lot of stuff. We also sell a lot of stuff to other countries. So we do have a big stake in global shipping. India operates about 236 ships in total, and it is bound to increase. If we do see such kind of taxes being imposed on Indian ships also, it will lead to more fuel costs. It will lead to more money being spent if we want to transition towards cleaner fuel. It is estimated that by 2030, increased fuel cost on India would be about $108 million, which is manageable for a country's scale. We are also very positive towards pushing towards green energy. We are hoping that the green hydrogen mission specifically will give us a dividend that we are hoping for in the long run. So it's a long-term play. We are hoping that these kind of things will work in our favor. It remains to be seen whether we are able to get that kind of an output. Now, green shipping, as I said, is important because we just saw in the beginning how much does it contribute to global emissions. This is also in line with the Paris climate deal. It's in line with the sustainable development goals that the countries have set. The IMO has already set a target to reduce CO2 intensity by 40% by 2030. Not just this, they are going even more aggressive to reduce the emission by 70% by 2040. The shipping industry specifically aims to be net zero by 2050. So the aim is that net and net, the shipping industry specifically become net zero. Whatever emissions they have, they're trying to neutralize that by ensuring that it doesn't harm the environment. Over here, one other issue that is related to it is the idea of common but differentiated responsibility. You would have heard about this. in talks of climate change specifically. Common but differentiated responsibility is an aspect where all the countries share a responsibility. All the countries accept that they have to work in order to safeguard our planet, in order to work against climate change, but they don't have equal responsibility. The amount of cuts that US should do are not the same that India should also do. The amount of cuts that a developed country has to do is not the same that should be expected by a less developed country or a developing country. In this area where we are talking about shipping industry putting emissions or putting levy taxes on the ships that are emitting a lot more pollution, that also goes against this principle. Because if you are putting same kind of taxes on ships of all the countries, then this idea of differentiated responsibility goes behind. And this is also a big concern about how to solve this particular problem. The next topic that we have is a pretty interesting news, not something that is related to current affairs. It's more about a storytelling thing from history point of view. There's an article about how the Nizam era Hyderabad, where in the 1930s there was an important policy change to ensure that there is equality amongst employees of different religions as well. Now, I'll explain to you what this article is about, but before that, see what are the kind of questions that you see in the UPSC examination related to secularism and different ideas. This was a question asked in 2020. Now, the context of this article is very interesting. It's a kind of a story that in 1934, when you talk about the Hizam or Nizam of Hyderabad, the one image that you have in the mind is one of the richest people in the world during his time. However, you don't have an image of a very secular administration. But this is a story that proves otherwise. It says that originally it was only the Muslim employees of the government of Nizam who were given paid leave of 6 months to go and undertake religious expeditions. So, religious pilgrimage, if you want to go to sites such as Makkah, Medina, Najaf, Karbala, Baghdad, in all these places, if you want to go, the Nizam would offer 6 months of paid leave. So, it was only specifically for the Muslim employees. Now, the story is that when the Hindu employees also started demanding it, after some consideration, it was allowed for them as well. Now, there are certain names related to this, and this is where you have to remember, try and remember this from the prelims exam point of view. So, the first name is a Hindu employee who started this demand was Ram Swarup Tandon. He was the one who submitted this request that Hindus also should be given the same right if they also want to go on the religious pilgrimage, on their religious yatra. They should also be given a paid leave from their administration in order to go ahead and undertake that. After a lot of consideration, it was allowed. So the matter was discussed by the finance department, should it be paid leave or not. First of all, when it all started, the rules of the government was it would only be for the Muslim employees. However, finally, it was allowed and expanded to other employees as well. It was decided that for religious purposes, leaves will be granted to the Hindu employees as well if they want to go to sites such as Gangotri and Yamunotri. Very soon, in July 1934 itself, the rules of service were changed by the Nizam's government in Hyderabad, and it allowed 6 months of paid leave with advance salary for the Hindu yatras. These kind of instances or incidents can be asked in the prelims examination because they do ask these kind of questions at times. Also, who were the people who played an important role in changing of this policy? The Prime Minister at that time in the Nizam's government was Maharaja Kishan Prasad. He was the one who has to be given the credit of convincing the Nizam, convincing the government that this is the right thing to do. The move also showcased one of the earlier examples of how secularism was a priority for many princely states in the country even before India had become independent. That's an interesting story that you have to understand. The last article that we have here is a testament, rather, to the capabilities of human beings to take pollution to almost every corner of the earth, unfortunately. Even in the pristine ecosystem of the Himalayas, there is considerable amount of pollution right now. And as per the study, 84% of the plastic waste found in the Himalayas is single-use food waste. Now, what is single-use food packaging? Biscuits, namkeens, or these snacks, chips, etc. that you have, or let's say you have a bottle of cold drink, the plastic wrapper around it or that plastic itself. All these are considered as single-use packaging because when you take it off, there is no use of it. Please understand, there are plastic containers which are separate, which can be reused. You would see, let's say, there's a plastic container in which you have ordered food and the food comes from the restaurant, you can reuse it. But these single-use packaging is not reused again. That is what has been causing a lot of plastic pollution in the Himalayas. Related to this, see this question of 2019. This is not just relevant here, it was relevant for the first topic as well, if you remember. In the first topic for today, we discussed about EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. So it's something that is relevant for that as well. Look at this key finding. So the key finding is, if you look at the plastic pollution in Himalayas, the first interesting part is, it has been proven now that the amount of pollution, especially the waste that we have in the Himalayas, is increasing. Increasingly, more and more people are taking the trek to the Himalayas. Gone are the days when many years would go by before someone would trek all the way up to the Mount Everest. But now we have people lining up to go to Mount Everest. There are various reasons for that. There are better equipments, there's more support, there's more help, and obviously there is Instagram if you want to take a photo and show it to the entire world, because of which all these expeditions have become much more common as compared to earlier. When you have more and more humans or more and more people going to these places, they will consume food, they take the food with them, and they leave all those plastic wrappers, and that becomes a big problem. And this is what the study has found, that 84% of this plastic waste that we see in the Himalayan regions is just on the basis of single-use food and beverage packaging. Now, the interesting part is they have even pointed out which are the companies that are the most responsible. And when you throw some wrappers, the wrappers do show the story of which companies the wrappers belong to. There are three companies that are being blamed for this mainly. The three companies that have been responsible for this is PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, and Nestle. Now, please understand, I am not saying the companies alone are responsible. It is not someone from Pepsi or Coca-Cola who went to the Himalayas and threw their wrapper and came back. It is the individuals who did that. So it's not fair to just put your blame on these companies because they are the ones, or their wrappers are the ones that are being found there. Although these are the wrappers of these companies, but these are not thrown by these companies. These were thrown by the consumers. So these are the three companies that have been, or their vouchers or their wrappers were the ones that have been found. Interestingly, because a lot of their products are sold around the world, including in India, they also consistently rank as one of the most one of the biggest plastic polluters in the entire world. Whenever there are global audits, we do see these companies coming at the top of that list where they are polluting or increasing the plastic waste of this planet. It has also led to environmental concerns, because when you have waste on such a secluded place, in such a secluded place where you do not have any waste management system, that is when it becomes even worse. The waste management system, the infrastructure that we have is not optimum enough to ensure that we recycle it enough. It also threatens the biodiversity, it also threatens the indigenous communities living nearby. Because these are the places that see tourists and footfall from people around the entire world. When they come in there and they throw all these wrappers and they throw all these things that cannot be recycled, it harms the environment in that area. The ecosystem in these areas is anyways extremely fragile. And when you add to that that something else is being brought in from outside and that is being left there, it does not have a kind of impact that we would hope for. We just saw in the first topic for today, the waste recycling infrastructure is not even present in large cities, let alone having this kind of infrastructure in the Himalayan ecosystem. And this is where the big problem actually starts. India, for example, has been working to ban single-use plastic, but it does not include the single-use plastic used for food packaging. For example, India has banned single-use plastic. We have banned plastic straws, stirrers, etc. But the reality is, for example, let's say you buy milk, and when milk comes in that pouch is also plastic, but that has not been banned. So multi-layered plastic packaging, which is used by the FMCG companies that are outside the ban. So these kind of things that are still being sold in the plastic, that is still a major cause of concern because there is not enough recycling available, even in bigger cities again, let alone these fragile ecosystem where we can get rid of all of this waste. As we discussed earlier, we do have extended producer responsibility here as well. I'll tell you one more thing. Next time around when you buy a snack, see very carefully on that packet, it would be written in very small font that you can resell this packet back to the company, the empty packet, you can sell it back to the company at almost zero cost. It's a very, very minimal price that they offer, but it is a responsibility that the companies have to take as per the law. So they do that, they write it in the packet. If you want, you can sell it back to the company and the company will recycle it. But the problem is, from the consumer end, would you take so much pain just to resell that and just to send it back to the company so that they can recycle? In most cases, no one takes such pains. And that is why, despite the government's laws and rules about extended producer responsibility, we have not had the kind of impact that we hoped for. Waste segregation at source, something that the government is pushing the people towards, is still very, very poor. Again, it's poor not just in the tourist places, it is poor even in the bigger cities. Waste segregation means, as you know, when you're throwing off waste or disposing waste, dry waste has to be kept separate and wet waste has to be kept separate so that they can be recycled. They can be recycled in a different manner because both of them have a different mechanism of recycling. If you mix it up, it becomes almost impossible then to segregate it later on. At tourist spots, especially, you don't expect the tourists to follow this. It is wrong, but most of our tourists don't really follow this. You expect that to be followed at least by that community which is more learned, at least by the community which is more literate. But even in the bigger cities, the educated folks don't really segregate waste at source, and that also becomes a problem. Infrastructure for the plastic waste recycling is also something that is lacking, not just in our cities, but these tourist spots as well. And that is why the challenges are still very, very, very big. These were the 5 articles that we had for you for today. As you know, every single day we practice one mains answer writing for you, and we also discuss the questions given to you for homework last day. Let's see what kind of a question can we have in the mains examination from the very first topic that we had. The question that can be asked here is, e-waste is one of the fastest growing waste streams in India, but the country's response to the challenge has remained inadequate. Examine the cause and consequences of the e-waste problem in India and suggest a multi-pronged strategy to address the issue. Now, again, this whenever you see a mains question, I've told this earlier as well. Please understand, UPSC will always ask you multiple things in one single question. Like here also, they have asked you multiple things. First, they want you to comment on this line that India's response has remained inadequate. Second, they want you to examine causes. Third, they want you to tell consequences. And then they want you to suggest an approach. So unless you address or unless you actually mention all these 4 separately, you will not get very good marks. So in the introduction part, for example, we are dealing with this, that yes, it's a fast growing stream and we have not been adequate enough. As I told you earlier, the best way to write an introduction in a mains answer is either to write a fact or to write a definition, depending upon what kind of a question it is. If you read this question carefully, there is no technical term as such that needs to be defined. So if there was a technical term that needs a definition, a scientific term, an economic term from economics, etc., then maybe you could have gone ahead and defined it. But since it doesn't really need a definition, it's better to go ahead with a fact. Now, in these kind of questions, ideally you should have a fact with you. If you don't have such a fact that we have mentioned here, maybe go ahead and just define what is e-waste. That would not be an ideal beginning to it, but at least you can start with that definition. The ideal beginning here would be to start with the fact, and fact about how the global waste has increased, some numbers about how the global waste has increased in the past few years. And if you can quote certain reports, if you can quote certain data, that would be even better. So that is how we start this answer, by writing the intro. In the main body, as I told you, there are now three other things. The first thing we have answered, that is addressing the issue of how the global waste has been increasing. Now we're going to talk about causes, consequences, and suggestions. So causes, as we discussed in the first topic as well, the main causes for increasing of this waste is technological obsolescence, means more and more technology coming in. Whatever you buy today, you will feel it is outdated after 1 year. You have this urge to now switch to a better model, to switch to a better version of it, and that is also that is what leads to a lot of this waste going out of hand. So rapid technological advancements, increased consumerism. The example that I gave you, you buy much more than what you need. Need based buying has been converted to want based buying. So you buy more because you want it, not because you need it. And that becomes a big issue. As I told you, a lot of us have more than one earphones. Some of us would have more than one headphones. Some of them would have more than one laptops or phones, etc., TV screens. Lack of awareness about how to dispose. Most people, common people, would not know how to dispose their appliances. The only thing that they would know is throw it in the dustbin, wait for someone to come and pick it up, but they don't know how to dispose it properly. That also is a big problem. The informal sector issue, as we discussed, in India, only 10% of the e-waste is recycled through a formal sector. 90% of it is recycled through informal sector. Weak enforcement. We never have a problem of absence of laws. We always have laws, but the problem has always been the weak enforcement. So the enforcement has not been up to the mark. We have to ensure that the laws, the extended producer responsibility rules that we have, are implemented properly, strictly, and those who are responsible are the ones who are paying for it. So this is the second part where we answer about what are the causes. Then the next is the consequences part. Again, something that we did discuss. Environmental degradation, how these chemicals can harm us, can harm the environment by mixing in the water supply. Public health risk, for example, you would have heard about something called the Minamata Convention. The Minamata Convention, for example, was something that came into being after there was mercury poisoning in Japan. Mercury got mixed with water supply, and it led to a lot of fish in taking in mercury, and that led to people who ate that fish falling ill. So that is an example of what mixing of these minerals with the water supply and other things can do. It leads to loss of resources, precious metals that could be recovered, that have a lot of value economically. They are just put to waste, and the urban waste burden also increases. All these are the consequences that we see when e-waste goes out of hand. So that's the third part. So we've answered the causes, the consequences. Then we have to give you the suggestion. We have to write the suggestion of how to improve it. Writing the suggestion part is not difficult if you understand what the problem is. Whatever you wrote in the causes part, just write opposite to it one by one, and it will become your solution. Simple. So in the causes, we wrote about the informal sector. In the solution, the first solution can be formalize the informal sector. Give them training, give them equipments, tell them or give them the skills that are required to recycle that. Have better extended producer responsibility laws, track real-time data, see which companies are fulfilling their responsibility, which are not. Have better public awareness so that the people, common people, know how to recycle all these appliances. You also need to develop more infrastructure, and at the end of the day also have better research and development. Have better research about how can we make appliances using lesser and lesser chemicals. How can we use appliances that have a longer life? You know, I just give something, or just reminded me of something. Many decades ago, these electronic companies, when they used to make those bulbs, luminescent bulbs that we had, the yellow ones, many years ago, electric companies had this meeting where they decided that if we make electric bulbs that have a very long life, we will run out of business. So everyone decided that we should make electric bulbs with a limited life. If you make something that goes on and on and on and just never goes out of work or never runs out of life, no one will buy the second product. So if we want people to buy the second product or the second version or the better version of it, we have to make sure that at the end of the day, it also gets over. That is what the companies do, and this is where the governments have to ensure that companies are not working from the point of view of profit only. The governments have to make sure the companies are working from the point of view of what is more sustainable for the environment. So do research and development in improving how these machines are made, and then you can conclude it by writing about how e-waste is something that should be worked upon, how it is a big challenge for the government. Now, yesterday you were given 3 questions from the prelims exam point of view as your homework. I hope all of you did it. Let's discuss those and then I'll come on to the question that I have to give you for homework. First question was, with reference to total fertility rate in India, consider the following statements. First, it indicates average number of children a woman is expected to have during her reproductive years. Absolutely correct. This is the definition of it. That is a total fertility rate on an average, how many children a woman would have. A TFR of 2.1 is considered to be replacement level fertility. Absolutely correct. So when a country reaches 2.1 as the fertility rate, that means that they have reached the level of replacement, means the population will now remain stable. The logic is two parents, husband, wife, they give birth to 2.1. So two children who will replace their parents. 0.1 is basically a calculation because not every child will survive. So that's the 0.1 thing. Two children who replace their parents later on, and 0.1 is basically just accommodating for the children who would not survive, unfortunately. So yes, 2.1 is the replacement level fertility rate. As per SRS data 2021, India's TFR has increased to 2.3. No, it is still at 2.0. It has not increased to 2.3. So we are still nearby or even slightly lesser than the fertility replacement rate. Urban areas in India have a lower TFR than the rural areas. That is absolutely correct. In these kind of questions, I told you earlier as well, rather than remembering the exact number, rather than remembering exactly how much is the fertility rate in urban areas, rural areas, remember the trend. Where is it more, where is it less? That is more important. So the answer here would be B. 1, 2 and 4 here are correct. Second, with reference to cropping patterns in India, consider the following statements. First, rice and wheat are more preferred by farmers due to assured procurement under MSP scheme. That is absolutely correct. One of the problems why we have much more farming of wheat and rice, much more than the buffer that we require, is because of the MSP. Although MSP is announced on 23 crops, not just on wheat and rice, but the procurement under MSP is the highest for wheat and rice. So farmers think of it as a safe bet. Whatever they produce will be sold, so they won't have a problem. Second, cotton cultivation area in Punjab has increased significantly between 2015 and 2024 due to better price realization. Absolutely not. This is what the government wants to do. The government wants the farmers in Punjab, which is the most fertile state of India, to push away from wheat and rice and to explore other commodities, but they have not been doing that. Third, newer wheat varieties like HD3386 have more than double E potential compared to traditional varieties. So they have more potential, but not double. They have more potential, that is right, but double, no. That is not that something that has been proven. So they do have more potential of having more production, but double is not something that has been proven. So the answer here becomes A. One only is correct. Out of the 3 statements, 2 of these are wrong. One only is correct. The third question that was given to you here was, with reference to IMF's extended fund facility, consider the following statements. Number 1, it is designed to assist countries facing structural economic problems that require long-term reforms. Yes, that is what the IMF suggestion is. Second, financial assistance under this is given in the form of grants to promote social sector spending. No, see, IMF does not give you grant. Grant is something that does not come back. You don't have to return that. That is not something IMF does. If IMF starts giving grant, then how will they get the money back? So they give loans. They don't give grant, they give loans. Second is wrong. Third, it includes conditionalities related to taxation and institutional governance. Yes, whatever money the IMF gives comes with certain conditionalities, means certain conditions that you have to fulfill. Improving your tax structure, improving your governance, not giving freebies, not giving subsidies, etc., so that it is very well utilized. So the answer here becomes 1 and 3, C. C would be the correct answer here. I hope all of you got this right. Now, from today's discussion, whatever we have discussed today, I have 4 practice questions for you. These are your homework. If you want to attempt this as a quiz, go to the description of the video. You will find a link there. It will take you to our website where you can attempt this particular quiz. Tell us in the comment section how much did you score. So there are 4 questions here. First, second question about International Maritime Organization. Then there's a third question about clean energy, and then there's a fourth question. Again, all of these can be very easily answered if you were able to pay attention in today's class. This was it for today's session. If you are new here, do hit the like and the subscribe button. Do catch us tomorrow once again at 4 p.m. where we analyze the most important news stories of the day. Thank you so much. My name is Harshmeet Singh. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.